The flames roared around him, licking at the metal walls of the downed starcruiser. Smoke billowed through the shattered corridors, thick and suffocating, but he pressed on. Joran's armored boots crunched over the debris as his visor flickered warnings. Oxygen levels dropping, structural integrity failing. None of it mattered. There was still someone alive in here. The distress beacon had been weak, nearly lost in the static of deep space, but Joran had caught it. A single life sign, buried deep in the wreckage of the ruined ship. He didn't know who it was. He didn't care. Someone needed help. That was enough. He smashed through a half-collapsed doorway, the servos in his exosuit straining against the warped metal. Inside, the fire had yet to fully claim the room, but it was close. The heat pressed in on him as his eyes locked onto a figure pinned beneath a support beam. She was barely conscious, her breathing ragged, her dark eyes fluttering as she struggled to stay awake. Her suit was torn, the once pristine fabric scorched and ruined. Joran wasted no time. He knelt, bracing himself, and heaved the beam upward with a grunt. The suit amplified his strength, but even then, it was a struggle. The metal groaned, resisting him, until finally, it shifted just enough. With a final push, he tossed it aside and reached for her. "Can you move?" he asked, voice steady despite the chaos around them. She tried, but pain twisted her expression, and she barely managed to shake her head. Without hesitation, Joran scooped her up, careful not to jostle her injuries. She was lighter than he expected, delicate in a way that seemed almost out of place in a wreck like this. Alarms shrieked. The ship was reaching critical failure. If they didn't leave now, there wouldn't be anything left to escape from. Joran activated his thrusters, pushing through the smoke-filled corridors with the woman held securely in his arms. Sections of the ship collapsed behind him, fire consuming everything in its path. His HUD displayed a countdown, 40 seconds until detonation. He pushed harder. The exit was in sight. A breach in the hull, where the crash had torn the ship apart. His own vessel hovered just beyond, its hatch open, waiting. 20 seconds. Joran launched himself into the void, his thrusters burning hot. The ship behind them exploded in a blinding burst of fire and debris, the shockwave slamming into his back. He twisted midair, using the momentum to angle them toward his ship. The automated systems guided them in, and the hatch sealed shut behind them just as the last of the wreckage burned away. For a moment, silence. Only the sound of his own ragged breathing filled his ears. Then, a soft groan. The woman stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked at him, confusion flickering across her face. Then, something else. Recognition. "You," her voice was hoarse. "You don't know, do you?" Joran frowned. "Know what?" She tried to sit up, wincing. "Who I am." He shrugged. "Didn't really matter. You needed saving. I saved you." A small, almost amused smile tugged at her lips. "I am Soraya Valaner, Princess of the Celestial Dominion." Joran blinked. He had just risked his life for royalty? He let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Figures." Soraya studied him, something unreadable in her gaze. "You're human, aren't you?" "Last I checked," he replied. She exhaled softly, her expression shifting. "My people don't think much of humans. They see you as primitive. Reckless." Joran smirked. "And yet, here we are." A pause. Then, she laughed, quiet but real. "Yes, here we are." The ship hummed as it began its journey away from the wreckage, into the stars beyond. Whatever happened next, Joran had a feeling life was about to get a whole lot more complicated. Soraya leaned back against the medbay cot, wincing as the autodoc scanned her wounds. The soft hum of Joran's ship filled the air, a stark contrast to the roaring flames they had just escaped. He stood nearby, arms crossed, watching her with an unreadable expression. "You're taking this awfully well," she mused, tilting her head slightly. Most people would be falling over themselves upon realizing they just rescued a royal. Joran snorted. "Lady, I didn't even know who you were 5 minutes ago. No offense, but royalty doesn't mean much when you're trapped in a burning wreck." She gave a small, knowing smile. "A practical man. That explains why you didn't hesitate." He shrugged. "Someone needed help. Simple as that." The autodoc beeped, finishing its scan. A holographic display flickered to life above her, detailing her injuries. Nothing life-threatening, but she was banged up pretty bad. It would take time to fully heal. Soraya sighed, closing her eyes for a moment. My people, they will be looking for me. If my escape pod's beacon was active, the Imperial Guard may already be on their way. Joran raised an eyebrow. Yeah? And what happens when they find you on my ship? She hesitated. That depends. On what? On whether they believe you rescued me or took me hostage. Joran let out a slow breath. Great. So now I've got an interstellar empire that might think I kidnapped their princess. That's just fantastic. Soraya smirked, despite the situation. You did carry me off into space, unconscious, in your arms. From the right perspective, it does look a bit dramatic. Joran rolled his eyes. Right. Next time I'll leave you under the burning wreckage. See? Reckless, she teased. Before he could reply, the ship's console chimed. A proximity alert. Joran turned on his heel and moved to the cockpit, Soraya trailing behind him despite the autodoc's warnings to rest. The main display lit up, showing a formation of sleek, silver ships emerging from hyperspace. The insignia of the Celestial Dominion gleamed on their hulls. Guess your people found you, Joran muttered. Soraya's expression grew serious. Hail them. Joran didn't argue. He opened the comms channel, and a stern-faced man appeared on the screen, his uniform pristine, his eyes sharp. Princess Soraya, the man said, relief barely touching his tone. We detected your signal and feared the worst. His gaze flickered to Joran. Who is this human? Soraya straightened, her royal demeanor slipping into place effortlessly. This is Captain Joran Rains. He rescued me from the wreckage. The officer's expression remained unreadable. A human mercenary? Rescued you? There was clear skepticism in his voice. Joran crossed his arms. You're welcome, by the way. Soraya shot him a brief glance before turning back to the screen. Joran risked his life to save mine. If not for him, I would be dead. I owe him a great debt. The officer's expression shifted, only slightly. The Emperor will want to hear of this. Then take me to him, Soraya said firmly. Joran exhaled sharply. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hold up. You want me to go meet your Emperor? You just said your people don't think much of humans. Pretty sure that includes your dad. Soraya hesitated, but then met his gaze. Yes, and that's exactly why you need to come with me. Joran frowned. I don't follow. You saved a member of the royal family. No human has ever done such a thing. If you come with me, I can ensure you are honored, not treated as a criminal. More than that, she hesitated, then spoke carefully. You might just change the way my people see yours. Joran ran a hand through his hair. Fantastic. No pressure or anything. Soraya's eyes softened. You don't have to do this. I can tell them you let me go, and you'll be free. Joran glanced at the Dominion ships outside, then back at her. He didn't trust these people. But Soraya? He had risked his life for her without knowing who she was. And now, she was giving him a choice. He let out a long sigh. Well, never been to a royal palace before. Soraya smiled. Then let's change that. Joran turned back to the controls, guiding his ship toward the fleet. Whatever happened next, one thing was for sure. Life was about to get a lot more interesting. As Joran's ship docked within the colossal Dominion flagship, he exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. The vessel was massive, easily 5 times the size of any human battleship he'd seen. The sleek, obsidian hull gleamed under the artificial lights, and the docking bay alone was large enough to house an entire fleet. His gut told him this was a bad idea. The Celestial Dominion wasn't exactly known for being friendly toward humanity. In fact, most interactions between their people involved humans being politely ignored or aggressively removed. Yet here he was, stepping onto their flagship with their princess at his side. The moment they disembarked, an honor guard formed around them, their silver-plated armor gleaming under the soft white lights. The Dominion soldiers stood stiff and disciplined, but Joran could feel the tension in the air. They didn't like his presence here. If it weren't for Soraya, he was pretty sure they'd have shot him on sight. A tall figure approached, Commander Vaylor, the officer from the transmission. He had the look of a man who rarely smiled and had never once been surprised in his life. He glanced at Soraya first, giving her a short bow. Then his sharp eyes flicked to Joran. The Emperor is expecting you, Vaylor said, his tone cool. The fact that you are here at all is unprecedented. Joran smirked. Yeah, saving royalty tends to shake things up, huh? Vaylor's jaw twitched, but he didn't take the bait. Instead, he turned sharply and gestured for them to follow. Joran leaned toward Soraya as they walked. So, be honest with me. What are the odds your father just executes me on the spot? Soraya hesitated. Small. Joran stopped mid-step. Define small. She sighed. Less than 50%. That's not exactly comforting, princess. Soraya gave him a sideways glance, but he caught the hint of amusement in her eyes. Trust me, I won't let anything happen to you. Yeah, well, no offense, but I'd prefer if not dying wasn't entirely dependent on royal goodwill. They entered a grand hall, lined with towering statues and banners bearing the Dominion insignia. At the far end, seated upon an elevated throne of black stone and gilded metal, was the Emperor himself, Soraya's father. Emperor Kale Valaner was an imposing figure. He radiated authority, his dark robes edged with royal crimson, his piercing silver eyes locked onto Joran the second he entered. His expression was unreadable. The chamber was silent. Dozens of nobles and high-ranking officials were present, all watching with barely concealed curiosity. A human standing before the Emperor of the Dominion? Unthinkable. Soraya stepped forward and knelt. Father. The Emperor nodded slightly. Rise, my daughter. His gaze flickered to Joran. And this is the human who saved you. Soraya glanced at Joran, who remained standing, arms crossed. Yes, his name is Captain Joran Rains. The Emperor studied him. A mercenary? Joran scoffed. More like freelancer. But sure, call it what you want. Murmurs rippled through the gathered nobles. The Emperor leaned forward slightly. You risked your life to save my daughter. What? Joran shrugged. Seemed like the right thing to do. That answer caught some of the nobles off guard. Even Soraya's expression flickered with surprise. The Emperor's gaze narrowed. And yet you knew nothing of her status? Didn't need to, Joran replied. She was trapped. She would have died. That's all I needed to know. Silence. The Emperor studied him for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. You are an anomaly, Captain Rains. Joran grinned. I get that a lot. Soraya visibly tensed, but the Emperor merely exhaled. In saving my daughter, you have placed me in an unusual position. The Dominion does not reward humans often, nor do we owe them debts. Joran raised an eyebrow. Sounds like there's a but coming. The Emperor's lips curled slightly. But you have earned something rare. A royal favor. You may ask for a reward, within reason. Joran blinked. He hadn't expected that. Money? A ship? Weapons? A pardon for whatever trouble he might get into in the future? But then his eyes flickered to Soraya. And an idea formed. I want something simple, he said. An opportunity. The Emperor's brow furrowed slightly. Explain. Joran crossed his arms. Humans, in the Dominion? We don't exactly see eye to eye. You think we're reckless, primitive. But I think that's because you don't really know us. He glanced at Soraya. So here's my request. Let me prove to you what humans are capable of. The murmurs among the nobles grew louder. The Emperor raised a hand, silencing them. You seek to challenge the perception of your people? Joran grinned. Something like that. Give me a chance. A real one. You've got wars, conflicts, problems across the stars. Let me help. Put me where you think a human would fail. His grin widened. And I'll prove you wrong. The Emperor was silent for a long time. Then, slowly, a smile, a rare, dangerous thing, crossed his lips. Very well, he said. You wish to prove yourself? Then let us see if humanity is truly as exceptional as you claim. Joran exhaled. That sounded ominous. The Emperor stood. Commander Valer, prepare him for the trials of Dominion. Joran frowned. Trials? Plural? Soraya winced. Oh no. Joran turned to her. What do you mean, oh no? She sighed. You just signed yourself up for a series of deadly challenges designed to test the worth of a warrior in the Dominion. Joran groaned. Yeah, that sounds about right. The Emperor's gaze was sharp. Succeed, and you will earn the respect of the Dominion. Fail, and you will not leave this place alive. Joran rolled his shoulders, cracking his neck. Great. Nothing like a little high-stakes action to keep things interesting. Soraya sighed. Joran, you really need to learn when to keep your mouth shut. He smirked. Where's the fun in that? The chamber doors opened, and the honor guard stepped forward, ready to escort him to whatever nightmare he had just volunteered for. Joran took a deep breath. This was going to be fun. Joran had been in bad situations before. Ambushes, bounty hunts gone wrong, smuggling runs that ended with him dodging railgun fire. But this was something else. The Trials of Dominion. The name alone didn't sit right with him. Any challenge that had the word trial and it usually meant pain, suffering, and at least a few opportunities to die horribly. And judging by the way Soraya had paled when the Emperor announced it, he figured his odds weren't exactly great. Still, he'd run his mouth, made a challenge, and now he had to see it through. Because if there was one thing humans didn't do, it was back down. Joran stood in a massive arena, the walls lined with thousands of Dominion spectators. Towering spires of alien metal stretched high into the air, shimmering with energy fields that kept the audience safe from whatever carnage was about to unfold. Across from him, a dozen Dominion warriors in full combat armor stood at the ready, their weapons gleaming under the artificial sunlight. Soraya's voice crackled over the hidden comm in his ear. Joran, listen to me. The gauntlet is a combat trial. They're going to throw everything at you. Surrender now and... Yeah, Joran muttered, rolling his shoulders. Surrender, save my life, blah blah blah. Not happening, princess. You stubborn idiot, she hissed. He grinned. You say that like it's a bad thing. A deep voice echoed through the arena, amplified for all to hear. Let the trial begin. The warriors charged. Joran barely had time to react before the first soldier lunged at him, a plasma blade humming to life. He ducked, sidestepping the swing, and drove his elbow into the warrior's gut. The Dominion soldier grunted, but didn't go down. Joran followed up with a brutal uppercut to the jaw, sending him sprawling. Two more came at him. Joran ripped a blade from one of their belts, spun, and slashed through the exposed joint of their armor. The soldier howled, dropping his weapon. Joran kicked him backward and used the stolen blade to block an incoming strike from the second attacker. Sparks flew. All right, he muttered to himself. So far, so good. Then, the real trouble began. The walls shifted, and automated turrets emerged, firing stun blasts that would knock out a lesser opponent in seconds. Joran ducked and weaved, using the fallen soldiers as cover. He grabbed a plasma rifle from the ground, took aim, and shot out the nearest turret in a shower of sparks. The crowd gasped. Humans weren't supposed to be this fast, this clever, this good. But Joran wasn't just any human. He fought like a man who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. He dodged, struck, and outmaneuvered the Dominion warriors, using their own weapons and arrogance against them. By the time the dust settled, Joran was the last man standing, breathing heavily, his stolen blade dripping with energy residue. Silence. Then, the crowd erupted in cheers. The Emperor, watching from above, raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Soraya, watching from the royal balcony, exhaled in disbelief. He actually did it. The next test wasn't about brute strength. Joran found himself inside a vast, holographic chamber, facing an intricate puzzle that no human had ever seen before. The Dominion valued intelligence as much as strength, and this trial would test whether he was truly worthy. Soraya's voice came through the comms. This test has stumped Dominion scholars for years. Please, for once in your life, don't just try punching something. Joran smirked. No promises. The puzzle was a shifting maze of energy patterns, constantly changing, adapting to his movements. If he took the wrong path, the floor would drop out from beneath him. All right, brain, he muttered. Time to do your thing. He studied the patterns, noticing the way the energy pulses moved in cycles. Dominion minds worked in structured logic. Predictable, if he could time it just right. He took a step forward. The maze shifted, but Joran was faster. He adjusted, moved sideways, leapt over a false pathway. And then he was through. The holographic walls vanished, revealing the shocked faces of the Dominion judges. One of them muttered, "That was supposed to take hours." Joran dusted off his hands. "Guess I'm just efficient." The third trial wasn't in an arena. It wasn't a puzzle. It was face-to-face with the Emperor himself. Joran stood before the throne once more, bruised but victorious. The Emperor leaned forward, studying him with an intensity that made even Joran feel a little uneasy. "You have strength. You have intelligence. But one thing remains your true nature." Joran frowned. "Not sure I follow." The Emperor nodded to a guard, who brought forth a holographic tablet. A bounty notice appeared, Joran's face, a long list of crimes underneath. Smuggling, unauthorized salvage operations, illegal weapons trade. Soraya stiffened. "Father." The Emperor raised a hand. "Do not speak, daughter." His gaze never left Joran. "You are not a hero. You are not a noble warrior. You are a rogue. A mercenary. Joran exhaled slowly. Yeah, I was. Not exactly a secret. The Emperor considered this. And yet, when faced with death, you chose to save another. When given a challenge, you did not run. That is unexpected. Joran shrugged. People aren't just one thing, Your Majesty. The Emperor was silent for a long moment. Then he stood. Very well. His voice rang across the chamber. You have passed the trials. You have earned not only your survival but the respect of the Dominion. Gasps rippled through the nobles. Soraya's face lit up with relief. The Emperor's gaze turned sharp. However, I do not grant this lightly. You will not simply walk away with a favor. No, Joran reigns you will serve. Joran blinked. Wait, what? You have proven yourself. And now, you will use that strength in service of the Dominion. The Emperor's lips curled slightly. If humanity wishes to be recognized as something greater, then let us begin with you. Soraya smirked. Congratulations, Joran. You're now the first human officer of the Celestial Dominion. Joran groaned. This was not the plan. The Emperor's eyes gleamed. It never is. As Joran stood there, processing the insanity of what had just happened, he realized something. He had just changed history, and things were about to get very interesting.